That moment stays with you longer than it should. One sentence, one tone, one harmless comment. You replay it in your head hours later and can't figure out why it hit that hard. That's not sensitivity, and it's not weakness. Welcome to Dark Mind Academy, where reactions are never accidental. Most people think emotional control is about staying calm. It's not. It's about understanding why certain emotions get triggered, who benefits when they do, and what actually happens the moment you react. Because once you see the mechanism, it stops working. Let's start with the part almost everyone misunderstands. Emotional baiting isn't loud, it doesn't look like aggression, and it rarely looks intentional. In fact, the most effective emotional bait sounds casual. A joke that lands a little too close, a comment framed as honesty, a tone that suggests superiority without saying it outright. The reason it works is simple. Your brain reacts before you think. The emotional center fires first. Logic comes later. By the time you're explaining yourself, defending your point, or trying to clear the misunderstanding, you've already stepped into their frame. And whoever controls the frame controls the interaction. This is where power shifts. Not because you were insulted, but because you reacted. Here's something most people don't want to hear. The insult is never the objective. The reaction is. Once emotions move, three things happen automatically. First, focus narrows. You stop seeing the whole situation and lock onto the trigger. Second, judgment weakens. You respond faster, not smarter. Third, leverage changes hands. The other person now knows where your buttons are. This is why certain people seem to always know what to say. They don't. They know what gets a response. And once someone learns that, they can pull it again whenever they want. That's why emotional baiting is used in arguments, relationships, group settings, even workplaces. Not to win immediately, but to destabilize, because a destabilized mind is easier to steer. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. Most emotional bait doesn't come from enemies. It comes from familiar places. Friends, family, colleagues, people who already have access to you. That's what makes it effective. They know your values. They know what you care about. They know which identity triggers hit hardest. Competence, respect, pride, loyalty. So the bait is subtle. A question that sounds innocent. A comparison you didn't ask for. A reminder of a past mistake framed as concern. And because it's subtle, you don't recognize it as manipulation. You just feel off. That emotional shift is the signal. The moment you feel the urge to explain, correct, or prove something. Pause. That urge is the hook, because explanation is submission to the frame. Let's talk about frames for a second, because this is critical. A frame is the invisible rule of the interaction. It decides what matters and what doesn't. When someone baits you emotionally, they're trying to set the frame to one of these. You're defensive. You're insecure. You need approval. You need to justify yourself. Once you accept that frame, everything you say reinforces it. That's why arguing rarely works. You think you're clearing things up. They're watching you confirm the position they placed you in. Now here's the mistake most people make next. They think the solution is silence. Sometimes it is, but silence without understanding just delays the next hook. Real control comes from recognition. The second you can internally say, "This is bait," the power weakens. Because emotional bait only works when it feels real. Once you see it as a tactic, it loses its grip. This is where awareness changes everything. Instead of reacting, you start observing. Why this comment? Why now? What response are they fishing for? That shift alone rebalances the interaction. And here's something important. Power isn't about never feeling emotion. That's not realistic. Power is deciding which emotions deserve access to you. Not every comment qualifies. Not every tone deserves your energy. This is where emotional discipline separates controlled minds from reactive ones. Reactive minds live externally. They move when pushed. Controlled minds live internally. They choose when to move. Now let's talk about why emotional baiting escalates when it works. Because once someone gets a reaction once, they try again. Same tactic, slightly adjusted. If it fails, they retreat. If it succeeds, they escalate. That's how dynamics shift quietly over time. What starts as just jokes becomes disrespect. What starts as honesty becomes dominance. And if unchecked, it normalizes. This is why people sometimes look back and ask, how did it get this bad? It didn't happen all at once. It happened through repeated emotional concessions, small reactions that went unchallenged. Now here's the part most people don't expect. You don't shut this down by confronting it directly. Direct confrontation often feeds the frame. Instead, you disrupt the pattern. Calm responses, neutral acknowledgement, delayed engagement, not silent, selective engagement. You don't reward the bait with emotion. And over time, one of two things happens. Either the behavior stops, or the intent becomes obvious. Both outcomes work in your favor, because clarity is power. Now pause for a second. If this is already clicking for you, this is exactly the kind of breakdown we do regularly here. So if you haven't already, subscribe to Dark Mind Academy, not for motivation, for awareness. Now let's go deeper. Why do certain emotions get targeted more than others? Because they're tied to identity. Anger gets triggered when respect feels threatened. Guilt gets triggered when morality feels questioned. Pride gets triggered when competence feels challenged. That's why bait feels personal. It's not random, it's precise. Once you understand which emotion gets pulled fastest in you, you gain leverage over yourself. And self-control always comes before external control. Here's the quiet truth. No one can emotionally manipulate you without your emotional permission. That permission is unconscious, but it can be revoked. The moment you stop reacting automatically, the entire dynamic changes. Not immediately, but decisively. And here's the final piece most people miss. Emotional baiting isn't always malicious. Sometimes it's insecurity trying to stabilize itself. Sometimes it's dominance seeking reassurance. Sometimes it's habit, but intention doesn't matter nearly as much as effect. If something consistently destabilizes you, it deserves awareness. Control isn't about proving anything. It's about choosing clarity over impulse. Once you master that, bait turns into background noise. And people who relied on it lose influence over you. That's when power quietly returns. If this opened your eyes, you're already ahead of where you were. And if you want more breakdowns like this, deeper, sharper, and unapologetically real, welcome to Dark Mind Academy. Now tell me in the comments, which emotion gets pulled fastest in you? Anger, guilt, or pride?